Welcome to this week's episode of Insight. During this week's show, we're going to devote the entirety of the broadcast to the second anniversary of the beginning of the second Armenian genocide, which started on September 1923 with the final assault on Artsakh that led to the complete ethnic cleansing of the region. In the process, we will speak the truth and make everyone upset. I have waited almost 2 years for any political leader of the past 30 years to make a speech that explains this catastrophe, where it came from, talk about what we have suffered and what it means moving forward. And not a single one of them has done so because, frankly, none of them either have the vision, the moral leadership, or the understanding of the world to do so. What I will do in this broadcast is to make the speech that none of them made, essentially a speech that any political leader with credibility, with a moral compass and an understanding of the world would make on the eve of the second anniversary of September 1923. Dear compatriots, let's begin by understanding the realities that we've been dealing with for the past 3 decades. Most importantly, there was likely never a diplomatic solution to the Artsakh issue. It was, is, and in the future will be a winner-take-all game. All this back and forth between former diplomats and politicians about missed opportunities is frankly a waste of time, since none of these people can really assure us that if anything was signed in 97, 01, or 11, any of these agreements would have survived an imbalance of power in which the other side was stronger than our side. And in today's world, one would have to be quite naive to actually believe that would have been possible. Secondly, Armenians in Artsakh could have never lived under Azeri rule, no matter all the ridiculous fantasies of Western leaders and diplomats or lies that they're telling us, for a simple reason, and it's not a politically correct one, because Armenians, unlike Azeris, cannot live as slaves. The only issue was and is and will be in the future military capacity and state capacity to take and hold what is yours. The rest is all sophistry. In short, don't show me unsigned peace deals or initial peace deals. Show me armies. Artsakh was not lost between 2020 and 2023. It was actually lost every single day between 1994 and 2020 when we did not build a competent state and an economy in Armenia, i.e. every day that we were not making ourselves stronger and richer. The outcome that we saw in September 23 became inevitable. There are only 4 lessons to be learned from all of this. 1, moving forward, we can never be the weaker and poorer side. Our entire mandate right now is to switch this as quickly as possible, which is something that is happening anyway, but it's for us to make it happen much faster. The only thing that matters is hard power and men and women whose hands will not shake in exercising it. 3, to paraphrase Chairman Mao, peace, security, and justice only grows out of a barrel of a gun and not in so-called peace deals. And lastly, international laws and norms are meaningless. They have never protected our people's rights, and they should never limit what we do in the future moving forward. Now let's move on to the myths that both this government and the current opposition, the former government, have hid behind for the past 30 years. Let's start with the current government. There has never been a more moral and justified struggle than the struggle for Artsakh over the past 35 years. The struggle for Artsakh was about one thing, which is that what happened during the first Armenian genocide will never repeat itself again. We managed to make that happen during the first war, and by losing the second war, we suffered the second Armenian genocide. Artsakh is Armenian, and no amount of lies or changing of history by you or by the enemy will alter that fact. You bear your share of the responsibility for all the disasters that have fallen our people for the past 5 years, and you refuse to accept any of it. It is nothing more than degeneracy to try to hide your shame in the defeats and the humiliations that we have suffered by trying to discredit one of the most righteous struggles in the history of our people. Now let's move on to questions. Whose failed diplomacy was it? in late 22 that while recognizing Artsakh as part of Azeri territory, you still failed to secure Armenia's security or borders, or actually have the enemy leave occupied Armenian territory. Second question, by the way, are you not embarrassed by your war on Artsakh refugees? Have you ever thought about what has become of you? You, former journalists, democracy advocates, human rights advocates, have been reduced to vilifying refugees, the weakest among us, repeating your boss's Orwellian nonsense in rewriting history, while acting as water boys for the local neighborhood Hitler. Finally, you have no right to tell the people of Artsakh or future generations of Armenians of who can go back and live in peace and security in their ancestral homeland of more than 2,000 years. I will remind you, you yourselves won election in 2021 promising remedial secession for Artsakh. And what that means in real terms is that given the level of Azeri state criminality, the Armenians of Artsakh had a right to secede and have their own state. Now let me move on to what I call the traitor yellers, or the Davachan yellers, and their supporters in Armenia and in the diaspora. These are representatives of the old regime and who actually represent the official opposition in the parliament. Let me ask you, who built the army that went to war in 2020? Who turned our army into a den of corruption run by thieving, incompetent generals? Who refused to buy weapons needed to fight a 21st century war? We all have heard the stories about weapons that weren't bought because the commissions weren't right, and half a dozen other examples of such corruption. Who failed to turn Artsakh into an impenetrable fortress, which it naturally is? You can simply look at the war between Ukraine and Russia and the defenses that were built there. Such defenses built, for example, around Shushu and Hadrut would have prevented the disastrous outcomes of 2020. Who made the country a puppet of the Russian state, a dying Russian state? And who has, over the last few years, condemned the Russians for their endless betrayals of this country? We're constantly stabbing us in the back, the best example being what happened in September of 23. Furthermore, who weakened this country by turning our economy to oligarchs and other criminal degenerates while killing opportunity for millions of people living here? And whose thieving ways was it that actually prompted 80-90% of Armenians in 2018 to support the 2018 revolution and to believe that a parochial journalist was actually some kind of savior figure? Finally, and most importantly, which of you complained in all the years that your friends were in power about the need to improve our army, to buy new weapons, to prepare the army for a war that was inevitable? I will tell you this: your silence then in failing to speak up, if you had any honor, should mean your silence now. Moving forward towards the future, let's understand a few things. Everything that has happened in the past 5 years is a disgrace, and it is all our fault. We lost Artsakh in 23 because we as a collective did not deserve to keep it for now, to our eternal shame. The images of September of 23 and the ethnic cleansing in Artsakh will not be forgotten, and they will not be forgiven. And they will in fact become the defining moment, a defining event that will shape the politics of the region for another generation. And most importantly, they will shape the views of all future Armenian leaders. It is sheer nonsense to believe that unpunished criminality of that scale is the basis of any kind of long-term peace or understanding. You know, an interesting aspect that's actually been missed among all this is that we actually currently live in the period of the Third Armenian Republic. Let me explain what I mean. The one thing that died on that road from Berdzor to Armenia with the ethnic cleansing was not simply the last chance for any meaningful peace in this region, but also the Second Armenian Republic, because the mandate of the Second Armenian Republic, or the raison d'etre, was actually the existence of Artsakh and the defense of Artsakh. Without Artsakh, the Second Republic had no reason to exist. What's taken its place is the Third Armenian Republic, except no one has actually gotten around to announcing it. The two founding fathers of the the Third Armenian Republic, are actually none other than Ilham Aliyev from Azerbaijan and Nikol Pashinyan from Armenia. What is it that we can say about this Third Republic? It is a country that is clearly out of the Russian zone of influence. It is a country that is becoming politically and economically integrated into the West, one that's actually moved towards a post-oligarchic economy that is growing rapidly, and a country that, despite all of her faults, is actually more free and democratic than any of her neighbors. If you actually put all this together, it is actually the modern recipe for a successful, wealthy country that can actually defend her interests. What is most ironic about all this is that the two founders of the Third Armenian Republic are actually likely unleash the chain of events which are actually going to give them the exact opposite of what they were hoping for. In the case of the enemy, they took an Armenia under Russian tutelage, which was actually quite weak and manageable, and by forcing it to integrate into the West, is to create an Armenia over the next 10 or 15 years, which is going to be much more affluent and much stronger, at the exact same time period in which Azerbaijan is going to be entering its end of oil or post-oil economic debt spiral. In the case of our prime minister, he does not understand that the leaders, the future leaders of a wealthier and stronger Armenia, will actually see as their mandate to reverse all of the humiliations that we have suffered as a people for the past 5 years. Not to understand what is to come is to know nothing about history. The future Armenia could be many things, but almost certainly will be run by wolves and not by lambs. Thank you for joining me in these sort of insights.
Wait for me, and I'll return. Only wait very hard. Wait when you are filled with sorrow as you watch the yellow rain. Wait when the winds sweep the snowdrift. Wait in the sweltering heat. Wait when others have stopped waiting, forgetting their yesterdays. Wait even when from afar no letters come to you. Wait even when others are tired of waiting. Wait even when my mother and son think I am no more. And when friends sit around the fire drinking to my memory, wait, and do not hurry to drink to my memory too. Wait, for I'll return, defying every death. And let those who do not wait say that I was lucky. They never will understand that in the midst of death, you, with your waiting, saved me. Only you and I will know how I survived. It's because you waited, as no one else did.